Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about transit Chiron, square opposition or inconjunct one's natal Mars. Now, when we're talking about, transits that involve Chiron, it can be about physical and emotional wounds, depleted self-esteem, self-worth, how you feel about yourself, and also helping and healing others. Now, when you have transit Chiron, basically making an adverse aspect to one's natal Mars. So I'm going to elaborate on that. When I say basically adverse aspect, okay, squares and oppositions, of course, those are adverse and negative aspects in astrology. The inconjunct aspect is neutral, but neutral aspects can have good and bad qualities in them. So basically, collectively, I do see this as an adverse transit. Now, anyway, when transit Chiron is basically making an adverse aspect to one's natal Mars. While it may manifest in physical and emotional wounds, on depleted self-esteem, helping and healing others, these things may conflict with action. If you need to take action on something, you're dealing with physical suffering, of course. It can be difficult, and that could be difficult, of course, regardless of transits, but it may be more intensified when you have transit. This transit as opposed to many others. Now, and as far as the action goes, I mean, say if Mars is in Scorpio, it could be something with a will or taxes or insurance or a crisis-related issue. Also, Mars is about our drive and our motivation. And if you're going through any physical or emotional suffering at the time of this transit, naturally you're going to have more difficulty finding that drive, the motivation, the incentive just to do things at this time. And the thing too is keep in mind that Mars is also can be about it's physical and could be physical injuries, pain. And when you have a transit like this, you have Chiron, which can be about physical suffering, and also Mars you know, can be tied in with that as well, because again, it can be about physical related issues, injuries, it can be pain. The pain may cause more suffering at this point in time, or you might be dealing with some, could be emotional, psychological issue, suffering that might make it harder to deal with a physical injury. At this time, let's say the natal Mars is in Aquarius, and it might be some physical injury with the ankles or shins or lower legs, calves. Might be something associated with the nerves, as some examples. Now, also too, this might be a time. I mean, Mars is about our our vitality and energy. And if you're going through any physical suffering or some kind of something on an emotional level, even depleted self-worth or self-esteem, these things may have an adverse effect on your energy level at this time, or your vitality at the time of this transit. And you may feel, it might be, I would say this transit might make you feel a little bit like, could even be somewhat lethargic or sluggish at this time, because you are talking about, Mars is the planet again of energy and vitality, and then you have Chiron, it's dealing with, could be physical or emotional suffering at this time, some kind of anguish you may be dealing with, and this is something, and even your deepest pain, the suffering you might be going through, it might not, it can really have a negative or adverse effect on your drive, your motivation, your vitality level at this point in time. And Mars is also connected with art, with enthusiasm as well. You might not really, it might be harder for you to do things with that exuberance and that enthusiasm you had. And doesn't mean you won't do them. What it means, I mean, if you have to go to work at a certain time, something's mandatory, you've got to do this, and be at a certain place. I mean, naturally you're going to do whatever it takes to be there. But when you have this transit, it's going to be hard to have that life in you, that enthusiasm, that exuberance to do it at this time, and be more so than usual. Now, also too, anatomically speaking, okay, Mars is connected with the head, the face, and the skull. And it might be a time if you've had any problems with the head or your face at this time. it may be more intensified, it might be more painful, there might be more suffering in connection with it at this time. It can be, a time to, Mars is also, it's connected, with leadership at this time. And maybe there's, some difficulties where, whether it's physical or emotional level, there's some issues, that you feel like are making it difficult for you to be a leader at this time. And difficulty in inspiring could just simply be inspiring others, leading somebody to the right, to do the right thing, the right path, or what have you, career related, something of that nature. Or even if you're in a position, at a job, when even if you're in a subordinate or subservient role, in trying to show, some leadership prowess and ability to other people, and might not be there at this time because you might be going through, some issues that might be on a physical level. You might not be up to doing that. It could be on an emotional level as well. And also too, and you might feel, there might be feelings of ineptitude, which might be, prohibiting you from doing so at this time. And Mars is also connected with initiative and enterprise. And it might be harder for you to have to get up and go at this time, to initiate things, to begin something, to take the initiative in situations, whether it might be, an intimate relationship, communication, whatever it might be. It's something where, this transit, can be something where it just makes it, harder to do things again with that enthusiasm, that drive, that motivation to even start things at this time, taking the initiative, whether it's a relationship, an intimate connection, potential intimate connection, or what have you. At this time, it can be really something, or you're trying to reconcile a situation. Say if you have Mars in Libra and or the 7th house, it could be a reconciliation or some kind of negotiation at this time that you're trying to take the initiative on, but it can be difficult to do so. And Mars is also connected with the libido, the sexual drive. And it might be, if you're dealing with, of course, naturally, any physical related matters, some injury, something that's very painful, physically stressful, it might be harder to have that, to really, to have the sex drive at this time, to have the libido. It might impact it negatively or adversely at this time. The pain, you could be so dominated by the pain, physical pain or emotional suffering, that would make it difficult for you to be in the mood for sex, perhaps during this transit. Mars is also connected with combat and confrontation. So it might be a time, if there's an issue, where you had to confront somebody. Sometimes it may even be a physical altercation, but in many cases it could just simply be, a verbal argument, where something like this takes place that causes, it could be more emotional suffering at this time. Can be a time to where, and it could have a negative effect on, it might even exacerbate perhaps already depleted self-esteem or self-worth at this time, especially if you've lost an argument. If there was a physical confrontation, if it was a verbal argument, you felt somebody got the better of you on. This is where it can negatively impact your self-worth at this time. That may have already been, I should say, exacerbate self-worth that may have already been diminished or depleted now. And Mars is also connected with anger. So it's very important at this time to remember that, if you act out of anger, you're in a contentious situation with somebody, and you act out in some angry manner, it can be where there might be greater repercussions, or there might be more suffering. Doesn't mean it's going to be incarceration or anything extreme, but it can be something where there might be greater consequences than usual, because Chiron again is connected with suffering, whether on a physical or an emotional level. Another way this transit may manifest that may be difficult to help and heal others could be due to battles that you might be embroiled in at this time. Hold on a moment, people. Sorry about that, I'm back, but anyway. Now let's say, for example, if the natal Mars is in Cancer, in the zodiac sign Cancer, in the third house, it could be a contentious situation, which is Mars. Maybe it's over, or in something with something contentious, which is Mars, and over safety and security, which is Cancer. That may involve the neighbors, which is the third house. Now, also too, physical and emotional wounds and suffering may make it difficult and harder, again, to find that motivation, drive, which is Mars, to do things in general. Now, let's say if the natal Mars is in Virgo in the 11th house, it could be servicing or compartmentalizing, which is Virgo, could be computers. Maybe it's dissecting or analyzing an astrology chart. Remember that Virgo is about this dissection and analysis. 11th house is connected with astrology. And also to depleted self-esteem or self-worth, which is Chiron, may adversely affect activities that might require physical energy and strength, which is associated with Mars. Now let's say, for example, if the natal Mars is in Capricorn, it could be doing something with masonry or construction, carpentry, just something that requires that strong physical strength and energy. And also too, the pain that runs deepest, which is Chiron, may have a negative impact on you taking the initiative in some situation, which of course initiative is connected with Mars. If Mars is in Gemini or the third house, it could be some kind of communication that needs to be done, taken care of at this time. Anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, stay well.